am upset about. It's like, hey man, your meal ticket is under constant attack. There's been dirty plays all season. Caitlin Clark was assaulted yesterday in her very first playoff game in the W.
Look, we need to talk about what just happened to Caitlin Clark. And I'm not talking about some rumor or speculation. I'm talking about what we all watched unfold during her rookie season. The most marketable player in WNBA history. The woman who single-handedly turned the Indiana Fever from a 3,000-fan sideshow into a 17,000-seat sellout sensation just got brutalized in her first playoff game. And the league, the refs, they did absolutely nothing. Here's what nobody's saying out loud. Caitlin Clark dealt with more uncalled physical contact, more cheap shots, and more blatant targeting than any rookie in modern WNBA history. And when she finally spoke up about it, telling reporters, "I feel like I'm getting hammered, and everybody is physical with me, and opponents get away with things that other people don't get away with." The league's response was deafening silence.
She struggled with physical defense she's faced at the professional level and voiced frustration with the league's officiating, recently telling reporters, quote, "I feel like I'm getting hammered and everybody is physical with me, and opponents get away with things that other people don't get away with." That's what Caitlin Clark. If Caitlin Clark is the quote-unquote savior, if she's the golden girl, milk it.
Indiana Fever, all right, with Caitlin Clark, led the league in attendance both home and on the road. Fever averaged 17,000.
This isn't just about one player getting roughed up. This is about a league that couldn't protect its meal ticket. The woman who brought them 1.5 million viewers per game. The player whose jersey outsold every Hall of Famer in league history, including Diana Taurasi and Sue Bird. They watched her get assaulted on national television and did nothing. If you believe the WNBA needs to answer for how they treated their biggest star, hit that like button right now. Because what we're about to break down exposes a protection problem that goes way deeper than anyone wants to admit. Let's start with the numbers, because they don't lie. Before Caitlin Clark arrived in Indiana, the Fever averaged around 3,000 fans per game. It was basically a neighborhood gathering. But the moment she stepped on that court, 17,000 fans, every single game, home and away. The Fever led the entire league in attendance both at home and on the road. That's not just an improvement, that's a 400% increase. That's a once-in-a-generation phenomenon. Her game against the New York Liberty pulled 1.5 million viewers. That's more than some NBA games on TNT, more than established stars could dream of. She wasn't just moving the needle, she was the entire reason the needle existed. Product sales, historic. Her jersey became the best-selling in WNBA history, surpassing legends who built this league. She turned the WNBA into must-watch television.
Yeah, but she needs to be on a better team. She's on the wrong team. She's got the wrong skill set to handle the physicality of that league. And she's a...
So you'd think with all that star power, with all those eyeballs, with all that revenue pouring in, the league would protect her, right? You'd think the officials would be extra careful to make sure their golden goose didn't get her wings clipped by dirty plays and uncalled fouls. You'd be wrong. Many of you have been saying this for weeks, and you were absolutely right. The physicality Caitlin Clark faced wasn't normal rookie treatment. This was targeted. This was excessive, and it was allowed to happen game after game after game. She wasn't walking onto a basketball court. She was walking into a street fight where only one side was getting called for fouls. Let's talk about that playoff game. Her very first playoff appearance in the WNBA, the moment she'd been working toward her entire career. And what happened? She got assaulted. That's not hyperbole. That's not exaggeration. Multiple analysts, including Jason Whitlock, used that exact word. Assaulted in a professional basketball game, in the playoffs, on national television. But here's where it gets even more disturbing. This wasn't an isolated incident. This was the culmination of an entire season of dirty plays, physical targeting, and referee negligence. The infamous iPad incident should have been a wake-up call. A player literally jabbed her fingertips directly into Caitlin Clark's eye during a game, not going for the ball, not making a basketball play, a deliberate eye gouge. And what did the refs do? Nothing. No foul call, no stoppage to review for a flagrant. They just moved on like it was a normal basketball play. You were onto something when you noticed the pattern. Every game, Caitlin was getting hammered, pushed, grabbed, hit, and the whistle stayed silent. Meanwhile, if she breathed on an opponent the wrong way, the refs couldn't blow their whistles fast enough. It's almost like they were trying to send a message, like they wanted to remind her that no matter how many fans she brought, no matter how much money she generated, she wasn't going to get superstar treatment. Clark herself tried to stay professional about it. She'd mentioned the physicality in post-game interviews, always careful with her words. "Oh, I feel like I'm getting hammered," she said. But reading between the lines, you could hear the frustration, the confusion, the sense of abandonment. Here's a player giving everything to elevate the league, and the league couldn't even give her basic protection. Her teammates weren't helping either. In that playoff game against the Connecticut Sun, Clark dropped 29 points, dished out 10 assists, and grabbed 7 rebounds. She was doing everything. And what were her teammates doing? Missing open shots, running plays that looked like they came from a high school playbook, making mistakes that cost them possessions and momentum. She was carrying the entire franchise on her back while taking punishment that would make an NHL enforcer wince. The psychological toll of this situation is something nobody wants to talk about. Imagine you're the face of a franchise. You're breaking attendance records. You're breaking sales records. You're putting the league on the map in ways it's never been before. And every time you step on the court, you know you're going to get targeted. You know the refs aren't going to protect you. You know your own league is treating you like a disposable commodity instead of the generational talent you are. Connecting the dots reveals something deeply broken in the WNBA's power structure. This wasn't incompetence. This was a choice. The league chose to let Caitlin Clark absorb punishment rather than enforce the rules that were supposed to protect all players. They chose to prioritize some vague sense of paying your dues over protecting their most valuable asset. They chose to let jealousy and resentment dictate how their biggest star was treated on the court. And let's filter out the noise about what some players said. Alyssa Thomas made comments about racial dynamics in Clark's fandom, trying to shift the conversation away from basketball and onto social issues. But here's what that really was: a distraction. A way to avoid talking about the fact that Clark's success came from talent, hard work, and an ability to elevate everyone around her, not from some external factor, not from preferential treatment. She earned every bit of attention she got. The league promoted itself all season as the pinnacle of opportunity and equality. They talked about inclusion. They talked about growth. They talked about building something special. But when it came time to protect their meal ticket, when it came time to actually walk the walk, they completely abandoned her. And here's where the story gets really interesting. Drop a comment right now telling me what you think the WNBA should have done differently, because this next part is going to make you question everything about how this league operates.
Truth is finally coming to the light. The same light that is going to be dimming here in about 12 hours when Caitlin Clark is eliminated from the playoffs.
The truth about Caitlin Clark's rookie season isn't just about the physical abuse. It's about what that abuse represents. It's about a league so deeply insecure about its own identity that it couldn't handle having a transcendent talent come in and change the game overnight. They wanted her to suffer. They wanted her to earn it the hard way. They wanted to make sure she understood that no matter how much star power she brought, she was still going to be treated like everyone else, except worse. Let's talk about what ESPN did with all of this. They had the most straightforward win in sports broadcasting history sitting right in front of them. A generational talent bringing in record viewership, historic merchandise sales, and mainstream attention the WNBA had never seen before. And what did they do? They gave her mediocre coverage. They acted like she was just another player. They focused more on manufactured controversies about her fan base than on her actual jaw-dropping performances on the court. When Alyssa Thomas started making accusations about racial prejudice in Clark's fandom, ESPN ran with it like breaking news. Thomas claimed she'd never experienced such racial comments in her 11-year career, pointing specifically at Indiana Fever fans. She said they had to face serious matters that were unacceptable. And you know what? If fans were genuinely crossing lines, that should absolutely be addressed. But here's what ESPN refused to acknowledge. The overwhelming majority of Clark's fan base showed up because of her talent. Period. They watched her drain three-pointers from the logo. They watched her thread passes through defenses that looked impossible. They watched her carry an entire franchise from irrelevance to relevance in a single season. That's why they became fans. But instead of showcasing those record-breaking performances, instead of highlighting how she set the league ablaze with her skill, ESPN turned it into a racial debate designed to diminish her accomplishments. Clark herself had to respond to this nonsense. Standing her ground and insisting her success came from perseverance and hard work, not from any external narrative. The fact that she even had to defend herself like that shows how completely skewed the media coverage became. She's out there breaking ankles and breaking records, and they're trying to frame her success as something problematic. It's embarrassing. Multiple sources are whispering about how toxic the locker room dynamics became as the season progressed. We're getting into rumor territory, but sources suggest that some veteran players actively resented the attention Clark was receiving, not just in terms of media coverage, but in terms of how fans were responding. They saw sold-out arenas and record viewership numbers, and instead of recognizing that a rising tide lifts all boats, they saw it as Clark getting special treatment. If these reports are accurate, and the breadcrumbs certainly lead in that direction, then the league had a leadership problem that went way beyond officiating. You can't build a sustainable future when your own players are sabotaging your biggest star. You can't grow the game when jealousy and resentment are allowed to dictate how talent gets treated. The infamous eye poke incident is the perfect example of this protection problem. A player swats at the basketball, but somehow her hand turns downward and her fingertips jab directly into Caitlin Clark's eye. It's right there on camera. Everyone can see it. It's not a basketball play. It's dangerous. It's potentially career-threatening. And the refs just let it go. No foul, no review, no acknowledgement that something completely unacceptable just happened. They just moved on. That moment should have been the wake-up call. That should have been when the league said, "Oh shit, hold on, we have a responsibility to protect all our players, and we're clearly failing at that." But instead, they stayed silent. They let the narrative continue that Clark needed to toughen up, that she needed to handle the physicality, that somehow this was all part of paying her dues. Here's what kills me about this whole situation. The WNBA spent years begging for mainstream attention. They spent years trying to figure out how to grow their audience, how to increase revenue, how to get people to care. And then a once-in-a-generation talent walks through the door and solves all those problems in a single season. And what do? They treat her like a problem to be managed rather than a gift to be celebrated. They could have built an empire around Caitlin Clark. They could have made her the face of the franchise, the centerpiece of their marketing, the reason casual fans turn into die-hard supporters. Instead, they chose to let her get brutalized while they focused on managing narratives and protecting egos. It's strategic incompetence at its finest. And now, look at where we are. Clark's rookie season is over. She absorbed an unthinkable amount of punishment. She dealt with media controversies that should never have existed. She carried a mediocre team as far as she possibly could while taking hits that would sideline other players. And what did the WNBA learn from all of this? Based on their silence, apparently nothing. The league's inclusion efforts ring pretty hollow when you see how they actually treated their most marketable star. They talked about opportunity and equality, but when it was time to protect their meal ticket, they completely abandoned her. They let dirty plays slide. They let targeting go unchecked. They prioritized some misguided notion of fairness over basic player safety. What positive impact does that have on public perception? Even in the short term, you're creating a poisonous environment where talent gets punished for succeeding. You're sending a message to the next generation of players that if you're too good, if you bring too much attention, if you change the game too quickly, you're going to be targeted, and the league won't have your back. This whole situation makes the WNBA look like total amateurs. They had a golden opportunity handed to them on a silver platter, and they fumbled it spectacularly. They let jealousy and resentment dictate policy decisions. They let outdated thinking about earning respect override common sense about player protection. They chose chaos over clarity. The aftermath of Clark's playoff elimination tells you everything you need to know. ESPN is now scrambling, suddenly realizing what they had. The WNBA is dealing with fallout they created themselves. And Caitlin Clark, she's processing a rookie season that should have been celebrated as historic, but instead became a case study in how not to manage a generational talent. Here's the bottom line that nobody at ESPN or in the WNBA front office wants to admit. They had one job: protect your stars. Create an environment where talent can flourish. Build something sustainable around the players who are actually moving the needle. And they failed at all three. Players like Clark don't come along every decade. They don't come along every generation. When you get one, when lightning strikes and someone with that combination of skill, charisma, and marketability shows up, you treat them like the treasure they are. You build systems to protect them. You create structures that let them succeed. You don't throw them to the wolves and act surprised when they get hurt. The WNBA lost something this season, not just games, not just credibility. They lost the trust of millions of new fans who showed up because of Caitlin Clark and watched the league treat her like disposable commodity. Those fans aren't going to forget what they saw. They're not going to unsee the double standards, the uncalled fouls, the blatant targeting that went unpunished. And here's what should terrify the WNBA brass. This isn't over. The questions aren't going away. The scrutiny isn't going to lighten up. Every time they fail to protect their stars, every time they let jealousy override good judgment, every time they choose politics over performance, they're going to be reminded of how they squandered the Caitlin Clark opportunity. So if you want to see change in how the WNBA handles its superstars, if you believe leagues should protect their meal tickets instead of feeding them to the competition, subscribe and hit that notification bell right now. Because we're going to keep following this story, we're going to keep asking the uncomfortable questions that the mainstream media won't touch. And we're going to keep demanding accountability from a league that desperately needs it. The next video is going to break down exactly what the WNBA needs to change in their officiating standards if they ever want to be taken seriously as a professional league. You're not going to want to miss it. This is the reality the WNBA created. They had greatness in their hands and let it slip through their fingers while the whole world watched. That's not just a mistake. That's a tragedy. And the saddest part, it was completely preventable.